Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this workshop. We've got some regulars, I think, in the audience again. So thank you so much. It's lovely to see you all. I'm Fiona from Scotland Food and Drink. I work with the organisation that promotes and grows the food and drink sector in Scotland. We're really proud of our industry and all the amazing people behind it. So we've had a really great day so far. I've been talking about chocolate and cocktails, wild cooking, and delighted to have you, Heather. You're an amazing woman. I've got all these great things about you here to tell you about. So you run a business called Heathery Heights, an outdoor activity company, and you're a mountain leader, a mum, and a passionate wild foodie. You're a very busy lady, and you specialise in bespoke guided walks and learning experiences. Has anyone been on any of Heather's courses yet? Okay, that's good to know. And your passion is to connect others with the natural beauty of the great outdoors in an environmentally responsible way and create energising experiences and happy memories that will last a lifetime. So who wouldn't want to go on an experience like that? But today you're going to show us all how to make delicious food from things in the garden. So things that we all have around us. All looks really, really lovely. And you're going to help us think about, well, here's the title, Is a Gardener's Nightmare a Forager's Dinner? So things that we might not think, I'm not sure about that, we can actually eat. So Heather, you've got lots to talk about, lots to share, and going to inspire us all. There's a lovely recipe in front of me here. So over to you.
Thank you.
Thank you
good
very
afternoon,
much.
everybody, and I hope you've enjoyed your day so far. So today I'll just tell you a little bit about foraging and what I do, a couple of minutes, and then I'll talk about a few of the things we might find in the garden and what we're going to do with some of them. Some of them are gardeners' nightmares, in fact, maybe household nightmares in general. So foraging itself, if we think back thousands of years, I should say, we are basically all foragers, hunter-gatherers at heart, if you like, until supermarkets and everything else came along. And if you like, agriculture and the Industrial Revolution were the biggest changes in those factors. So a lot of knowledge has been lost really because of growing our own food produce and then obviously people moving into towns and cities. So really a lot of what we do is try to connect people back to many of the plants that some of our family would have actually used in the war because they had to. Mm-hmm. But a lot of countries and other parts of the world are still having to use because they may be very poor food sources, including even poisonous species, which they cook in ways to get rid of toxins. But we're actually more interested in sort of thinking about, well, what have we got growing at home in the backyard or in the back garden or that we see every day that we might consider a nuisance, which we could use ourselves as a good food source. And so a few things to think about, and the big one we'll be using a lot of just now is, of course, our good old common nettle. So Urtica dioica, basically we also have Urtica urens, which is a small annual nettle, but this one is a perennial. And if you hold it tight, the little hairs that are full of acetylcholine and formic acid, which would sting me, very fine little silica hairs that would pinprick and sting me. I'm holding it tight enough that those hairs have broken and are not going to sting me. But if I brushed it against the back of my hand, I would get stung. So this has been used for around 3,000 or 2,500 years, possibly longer, but it can go back as far as 1500 BC potentially, so possibly longer in the United Kingdom. And basically it's been used for clothes, linen, twine, dye, an incredibly good food source, anti-inflammatory, diuretic, incredibly high in vitamin C, K, D, and also magnesium and calcium and potassium. So very good trace minerals and a lot more, and iron. It is a superfood. It's far better for you than kale or spinach. And because it's growing naturally, it's taking up all those nutrients, whereas a lot of what we buy in a supermarket, not necessarily what you grow organically at home, in a supermarket, it's force-grown, fast-growing, very few nutrients. So you can use this like spinach. Best time of year is spring, when you get the lovely green shoots coming up. It doesn't sting you quite so much then either. But realistically, I would go out with gloves and a pair of scissors and snip the tips, top 6 inches or so, maybe less, 10 centimetres. But you want those nice young tips. And this is something that could be growing in your garden or just in the fields. It will grow wherever man has been, and there's rich nutrients in the ground, so phosphates. We really like to use this for both sweet and savoury. If anyone came to my stand earlier, they'll notice that I am doing a nettle and sweet Sicily drink, which is a sweet drink with cardamom, and I had nettle cake, which is all gone, actually, sadly. It's all gone. So we're actually going to be doing a savoury and sweet now, using nettle as a base. So that's one of the species, and I will mention, if you cut this back, it will generate more new growth you can use. In summer, we don't collect it. It gets bitter, a bit dry. It's in flower. It's also the only food for our peacock butterfly and little tortoiseshell butterfly. They solely need nettles.
Goodness.
So the caterpillars need nettles. Without it, they will not live. So that's really important. So actually for wildlife, it's about 100 moths as well that use nettle. So it is important. Aside from that, in the autumn, you can collect seeds in late summer, use them in bread, high in protein, a bit of omega-3, 6, 9. But also now, you'll notice that looks quite young. It's because you've got a new burst of growth in the autumn. It kind of does this, I'm going to do a bit more. Now I'm going to die. So right now is a good time to go out and collect those little tips. But you probably only get about 3 or 4 centimetres at this time of year. So that's the nettle, and we are going to use that.
So we definitely shouldn't be scared of nettle, but we need to embrace it.
Embrace it and don't be frightened of stinging yourself. You know, either be careful, but I do wear gloves to collect. Another one that is really good, your dandelion leaf, and it has a nice bitter flavour, but it's in spring, it's better because it's got a nice salady flavour that you can use. As it gets old, it does get really bitter. Again, a bit of a diuretic, but the root can be roast, and you can use that to make a ground coffee flavour. You can also roast it with some of the wild syrups I do, just a little bit of syrup, and then it'll give you a sweet vegetable. So if you are digging up dandelion in your garden, you can eat the roots and use them. You can also make all sorts of lovely concoctions with the flowers, like a dandelion honey. You have to collect all the petals and not the green bits, and you infuse it and make a really thick syrup, which is really like honey. So if someone's vegan, you can use that instead of honey for them. Common sorrel, probably growing in lots of people's lawns. I'll find a better leaf. It's part of the Rumex family, same family as dock, and you'll notice it has that lovely V at the bottom of the leaf. And it has oxalic acid in it, which gives it a lovely lemony tang. So you can use this in salads or just to put into things to give it a bit of flavour, lemony flavour. Really nice. The only thing I'll say is if somebody has kidney stones, the oxalic acid in it will cause you to get calcium oxalate, which is part of kidney stones. So I'll just say don't really eat too much sorrel, rhubarb, a few other things that's got oxalic acid. We have herb Robert. This little one is part of the cranesbill family, and it has 5 little pink flowers. I've got some on the stand if you want to look in a basket, if it helps you recognise it. It sort of grows out in a rosette. Quite pinky red stems, has a very specific smell. It's actually part of the geranium family, so not pelargonium. Geranium and pelargonium are actually the same overall family, but the subgenus within. The cranesbill you can use as a herb, as a pot spike herb, and actually is meant to help cleanse your body and so on, and antibiotic properties. But I use it as a herb, so this is quite nice to use. Another common one, ribwort plantain. This is looking a bit sad after the heat in the hall. If anyone wants to come to see me afterwards about ribwort plantain or common Plantago major, the big plantain, please come. But you can actually use the leaves in salads and things in spring, and again, plenty of vitamin C and so in them. And the young flower heads that come up that are sort of like a blacky colour. They taste like mushrooms. You can use those in things like your barges and fritters and all sorts, like little mushrooms or in an omelette. So they've got really mushroomy flavour. And then I collect the seeds later in the year and mix them with dock seeds and lovage seeds and all sorts of things to create a nice dry seed mix, which I've dried to use in breads, biscuits, and just for flavouring. So that's a mixture of ribwort, plantain seeds, dock, nettle, and lovage.
Wow. Goodness. All these things around us that we maybe haven't.
And then I'm finally going to come onto this before I start chopping things. There's 2 more here. Sticky willies, cleavers, gallium. So basically, this is in the coffee family. And young cleavers, really high in nutrients and vitamins, really good. So when they're young and just coming up, you can chop them and chuck them in your pesto in spring. So if you're making a pesto, just think, actually, these are really nutritious. You can also scrunch them together, put them in a jug with some lemon, water, leave it in the fridge overnight. The next day, you've got a really good tonic, which is quite cleansing for the urinary tract and just generally has quite a lot of vitamins in it. So that's a good tonic for you, good way to start the day. And you've also got these little seeds at this time of year that stick to you. And those, when they start to colour purple or pinky brown colour, usually bigger than this, you can collect those, dry them and roast them. And guess what it tastes of? What family is it? Coffee. So it tastes like coffee. So you can basically make a coffee with this, the seeds. And then finally, yarrow, which grows everywhere, and it may be in your lawn, it may not. That's a sad specimen now because it's gone a bit wilty, the heat of the hall. But it has the lovely little white flowers, and that tastes kind of aniseedy, fennelly, and can be used really well with fish dishes or to make a yarrow rose or yarrow mule with vodka and various things, if you want cocktails. So it makes a good cocktail. So that's just a few of the ways. There's lots of others, but let's try and make something whilst I chat. Oh, one more I want to mention, which we're going to be using. Japanese knotweed. Oh. Okay, so this is pickled Japanese knotweed, been pickled with wild garlic and a flowering currant vinegar. Really tasty, and it goes really crunchy. So when I get a bit of help to put bits on the biscuits later, I'm going to get some of this put on the biscuits for people to try. Let's make something.
Didn't know you could eat that or pickle it anyway. There you go.
Yes, and you can make, I'm going to just give my hands a rinse because I've been touching weeds. So basically, you can use Japanese knotweed in a couple of manners, including an upside-down cake instead of rhubarb.
Who knew? Who knew? It's a revelation.
So I was washing my hands now because the weeds that I was showing you are actually not as clean as the nettles and things that we're going to use. So I just wanted to show you.
Has anyone been to Heather Stand already? Yeah, okay.
I think a few have.
Yeah,
so
great.
First thing I'm going to do is make some energy balls with nettles. So basically, all I'm going to do, I've chopped up some dates and raisins. So 150 grams of dates, 100 grams of raisins, and I'm just going to put those straight in there. I then need to put in some syrup. So this is the nettle, sweet Sicily, and black cardamom syrup that if anyone came to stand, they will have drunk some. And I'm actually just going to pour a bit in because I can pretty much measure that. That's that. And we're just going to leave that to soak for a minute or two. So I'll just give it a wee stir. Just needs a bit of the syrup. So these have already been chopped. Now you can whiz everything in a processor. I decided that that was going to be too noisy. So these will be slightly more rustic than if they'd been whizzed to a pulp. I'm also going to use about 100 grams of chestnuts. Now, normally I use walnuts, but less people are allergic to walnuts. So walnuts and hazelnuts, they are native things we would find. But to be fair, sweet chestnuts are in the south of England, but I noticed these are Italian. But there we go. Italian it will have to be. I didn't find any British ones. So we're just going to roughly chop these up. And these are going to get mixed in.
Do you have recipes on your website or your
So
social
no,
media pages?
so at the moment we actually do recipes for everyone that comes on foraging courses with us.
Okay.
There are a few on the stand as well. And we discuss quite a lot of things you can do with different wild plants. So if we're going out collecting hazelnuts and things, you know, it's not just about the hazelnuts. The young leaves in spring can be used to wrap fish and things or little cakes so you can cook with them. Other leaves you might want to consider are things like lime leaves or linden tree and beech, which are really good too and taste really nice when they're young, and hawthorn. But weed-wise, yes, you've got your dandelions, you've got your herb robert, you've got your nettles, you've got your hairy bittercress, which tastes really nice. I don't know if any of you know hairy bittercress, or pennycress.
I don't know that, yeah. Okay.
And that, you know, if you're growing cress in a little tray, basically it tastes the same. So you're thinking, why am I actually buying cress? I might as well just pick it out the garden. What other weeds do you think of in the garden that you try to get rid of? Does anybody have any?
Buttercups.
Yeah, unfortunately we can't eat those, so I can't help you on that
Buttercups.
one. Ground elder, has anybody had a problem with ground elder? Yeah, because that's another edible. In spring, you can actually use ground elder. I'm just putting a few toasted sunflower seeds in there as well.
So do you recommend that people go on foraging courses and get some guidance if they're new to all of this?
It's really helpful because basically what we do when we run our courses, I'm just going to let that settle for a minute, is we actually show people the different species and plants that they can use. So I just need to wash that knife. Sorry, thanks. So that's really important actually, is because there's a lot of poisonous fungi out there, as you know. Hemlock and hemlock water dropwort both grow in this area. Hemlock water dropwort is everywhere in Argyll, along the coast, in wet ditches. It is part of the carrot family, and it's hard to confuse with anything if you know what it is, but it can be confused with flat parsley or wild celery, and that is very dangerous because it will kill you. So there are species like that which you really don't want to get muddled up with. Then there are other plants that some people consider weed, like native hogweed. It's actually really good to eat. The young shoots in spring. You still need a bit of protection. It's not like giant hogweed, but a bit of protection, maybe gloves and scissors to collect the young shoots just before they unfurl. And it can't be mistaken for hemlock.
Okay.
It's totally different. And that is really good to eat if you just fry it with a bit of butter, stock, salt and pepper. Or you wait till now and collect the seeds, and the seeds roast and taste like cardamom-y sort of coriander flavour. Really nice, actually. So what I'm going to do now, we've already got some chopped nettles here. I'll just chop them up a little bit more.
Wow.
So these have been blanched literally for 1 minute.
Right.
And then drained. And that's it. And these are all going to get chopped up and put into make a wild nettle pesto.
They look very nutritious, look so dark and rich.
And they are really. So it's quite simple. So you're basically going to put in your nettles. I put in a bit of lime peel. I'm going to put in a bit of sorrel and a bit of herb robert. A bit of dandelion, you know, why not? You don't need much, just a little bit. And then we're going to add in some garlic. Now, in spring, wild garlic is the thing to get. I mean, gosh, you know, wild garlic is absolutely gorgeous. But unfortunately, this time of year, we don't have it. But I would say that you can freeze wild garlic. You can actually get a bit of puree, put it into ice cube tray, and that way, you know, you've got that nice flavour to share for the rest of the year. So you can just pop it out your ice cube tray, little bits of puree. So there's a bit of green chilli, just a little bit. Gives it a bit of zest and oomph. And then I'm going to ask Amanda in a minute if she'll come and do another little job, because we're going to be making some little balls. Right, so moving over here, we're going to put in, this is dried mint and sweet Sicily, sorry, in that one. And it just needs a tiny bit of sugar.
All these lovely colours there.
So this is going to be something you mix together to get some interesting colour. And this one
That looks beautiful, that lovely
is
pink.
wild raspberries
Wild raspberries.
with a bit of sugar. So that's that one. And then this one is actually wild yellow raspberries that I found, mixed with a bit of crystallised lemon and orange, but not bought, obviously. We crystallised it ourselves.
Gosh.
I make an oil item with lemon and orange zest, which means you get lovely lemon oil. But the sugar then is coated to the rind, and I then, make a crystallised fruit. So this is nettle powder. So we now got a nettle powder there as well, which we're going to mix with a bit of sugar. And I'm going to ask Amanda, she's very kind, this is a bit messy, make some little balls. Make some little balls, and then you just roll them, and they just need to be about that size, really, and you're just squishing it together really hard with your hands and rolling it into the actual mixes, so you can have a different colour for each one. So, and they can just go on to one of those. Meanwhile, I'll go back over here and carry on chopping.
So where do you go, Heather, when you take people out? Where?
So our main venues are the Tainish National Nature Reserve down in Knapdale, or the Argyll Beaver Centre area. We have done courses up here and at Loch Melfort and down at Kintyre Gin. So we do go to different places, and we also can do bespoke ones if people ring up and ask.
Right.
So that's quite handy. So I'm just putting a few toasted pumpkin seeds in. I'm only chopping them up a little bit because I want a bit of texture. Don't want it to be too smooth.
Foraging's become very popular, hasn't it, in recent
I think
times?
people get more connected now and want to know what it is that they've lost. And I think COVID helped bring people back into nature for a while.
Yes, it did. We were saying that before in the previous demonstration too. Yeah.
So it's really nice that people are doing that, and it's really good for younger people to learn what there is out there, because honestly, you know, so many don't, and they've forgotten. Now I'm putting in some ground pine nuts. Something else you can actually use, which is really nice, is they're quite hard to get hold of. Monkey puzzle trees have huge seeds, huge pine nuts. If you can ever find them, they are fantastic, and you can peel them and use those. And I would say, if you ever get the chance, try it. Now, I'm going to basically now be putting in some yeast flakes. This is just so that anyone that can't have dairy will be able to have a taste. So put in 3 tablespoons of that. Garlic is another important one. This is a little bit of elephant garlic, actually. So just take the peel off that. I should have smashed it with a knife, but I didn't. They're a bit harder to do, these really big cloves, but it does peel quite well. So there we go. I'm just going to chop a bit of that up, and then we're just going to put a bit of seasoning and oil in and mash it all together, and then that is the pesto pretty much made, and we can put it onto oat cakes and biscuits, and then you've actually got a combination of flavours, because we're going to put a bit of the Japanese knotweed on top of the biscuit.
Wow.
So these things, how are you doing?
I know.
Squishing.
Doing well. It's all right, you're not tasting you, man. They look great. Yeah.
I know, it's quite hard to get them going, isn't it? I think sometimes when you do it in the blender, it does work slightly better because it gets more of a puree. Yeah, yeah.
It's good for hitting here, just not very quickly.
Yeah, that's fine. So how fine shall I go with the garlic? Sometimes I actually just put it through a press, and then that's easily done, isn't it? So, yes, so on the foraging courses, we will actually look at fungi, seaweeds, flowers, greens, trees. I use conifers. I use a lot of different leaves, actually. And we use a lot of different flowers because you can make some beautiful cordials. And Himalayan balsam and Japanese knotweed are obviously invasive species. We're not allowed to spread. That is completely illegal. So, but, I was going to say, so, you can't do things like spread the seed around, but Himalayan balsam, you can put a big bag over the flowers and seed heads, let the seeds pop into the bag, collect the seeds, and they're really nutty, they're really nice to eat. So you can eat those or roast them and put in bread or on crackers. The flowers, if you like gin, you can just get Gordon's gin or something, and you can put the flowers in the gin, and then when you add tonic after straining them, you're going to get a colour-changing gin. So instead of going out there and buying a colour-changing gin, make your own with Himalayan balsam flowers. Japanese knotweed, as I say, you can use for sweet and savoury. You'll be surprised how many things we can eat that invade our gardens or invade the land. Hogweed, giant hogweed is bad. Yeah, that's nasty because it will give you blisters, the reaction with the sun. Very big, nasty bristles, the sap. But giant hogweed, interestingly, if you waited for the plant to completely dry up, so there's no sap, you actually then theoretically could collect the dry seeds as a spice. But because there's so many other issues with giant hogweed, I'd say no. Native hogweed, yes, definitely. Really nice to use. So I'm going to add in, this is just a bit of black pepper. Good dose of that. This is actually salt that's flavoured with Sitka spruce. So the young tips in spring, I use Sitka spruce for various syrups, liqueurs and things, but it actually makes a nice salt. So I do use that. And sometimes I actually do a mixture of dried garlic flowers, wild garlic flowers, a few flowered leek, and Sitka and salt, just to get a garlicky sort of salt, which is really nice for a lot of Mediterranean-style dishes. If you think Sitka, you can or any of the spruces, you can sort of think rosemary-ish, just because you've got things like thymol and so on, and a lot of these that help get that flavour. So just a little sprinkle of salt.
You've got an incredible knowledge. It's actually quite mind-blowing.
And then oil. And that is it. We can get those onto crackers. So we might have to help at your end. Oh dear.
But if there's one thing, Heather, that if you were to say to the audience, right, one thing to do after this, what to connect with the world?
I think just getting out there on either on a course or buying a book or spending time getting to know plants is really, really worthwhile. And it's not just connecting you with nature, it's just actually really good for the mind and soul because you spend time just concentrating on what's under your feet, which you don't do a lot of the time. So yeah, I think that's important.
Yeah.
Right, so this now is probably ready. I haven't tasted it. Do you want to taste, Fiona?
It's a beautiful colour. It's absolutely gorgeous.
There you go. I'll see what you think of that. I haven't tested it, so there you go. You'll be the first one to try it.
Oh, thank you very much.
Try it. It's very, very garlicky.
Yep.
And then I'm going to get that onto some flats for people to try. So, yeah, it's really worth looking at some of the wild weeds that you can use and plants. In the garden, other things you could eat, though. I mean, really I've got evening primrose that's growing all over the place, so you can use the flowers from that. A lot of your pelargoniums, some of them will have nice flavours. You can get those lovely lemony ones, which the leaves you can use, or the rose pelargoniums. So we call it rose geranium, but it's actually pelargonium, just to be confusing.
Okay.
Because it's where they split them in 1780 something into two different genuses. So they have nice leaves you can use either for your bath, they just smell nice, or actually to use in flavoured tinctures. You can use your rose petals, Magnolia petals taste like ginger if they're dried, so you can use those as a flavouring. Primrose flowers are lovely. Berberis or barberry, some people call it. The little yellow flowers taste like lemon and orange, but the blueberries are nice soury flavour. You can add them into things. And so if you're going out maybe getting something like meadowsweet or elderflower, you can combine quite sweet things with something with a bit of sourness to it. Japanese knotweed, actually, I quite like combining with rhubarb in a pudding, so I get half and half, because it gives a nice texture.
Yeah,
so you've got a nice texture. Sticky fingers.
Quite something. Great job, Amanda.
Right,
well
so I'm
done.
going to put some of these onto a little flask. So we want to put...
And have you taught yourself all this? Have you...
so
did you do courses?
Goes back a long, long time to... As a child, my mum and dad were always really interested. And in fact, my mum, quite funnily, my dad worked for the forestry. And she was putting sorrel in his sandwiches. And she said to him one day, what do you think of your sorrel in your sandwiches? And he said, not a lot. She said, oh, I think it's really nice. Anyway, next time she went out to the garden to see what she was putting in his sandwiches, she was giving him dock leaves. So although it's the same family, they taste really bitter and horrible.
Oh,
so he was having to remove. So he was removing dock leaves from his sandwiches. And then, yes, when I was 10, I mean, we did a lot at home. My granddad used to do birch tapping and all sorts when I was a kid. And, you know, there was things like going on a survival course at age 12 round Cape Wrath, where we were given catapults and fishing rods and told various things we could eat, including nettles. I remember making a winkle sandwich with 30 winkles in it. Whoa. I haven't eaten a winkle ever since. I really overdid that. Then we also, now this is totally legal because now we've had the Countryside and Wildlife Act, 1981. Back in those days, 70s, we were allowed to eat seabirds. You would never dream of doing this now, but we were eating guillemot. So that was one of the foods we were eating. Tasted like boiled fish, tough, really. Frog's legs, which was totally ridiculous because, you know, they were very small, poor little frogs. I was vegetarian for 30 years, I'm going to add. I sometimes wonder if it had something to do with a couple of things on that particular trip. But, yeah, we actually learned quite a lot and how to survive on wild food.
So you've been exposed to this from quite a young age and
So, yes, so I'm getting some of these out, so we're actually going to have some to try. Now, what I am going to have to do is cut up some little bits of Japanese knotweed.
Very, very tasty, by the way.
We also have seaweed capers here. So the odd one, I'm going to put a seaweed caper on. And whatever's left here, I'm going to be taking back to the trade stand, if you like, or the stand, and continue giving out food.
Sorry I've missed the cakes. I think the nettle cakes are
nettle cakes are
lovely.
gone.
It's all gone.
I know. I was thinking, gosh, I'll have to cut smaller portions next time. So, has anybody got any questions? Whilst I just do these, feel free
any questions,
to ask.
For goodness, so much knowledge. Yes.
Yes, okay, so I actually quite like the flavour, just generally the flowers. I add those to cordials and things. But if you want to make tea from rose bay willow herb, it is a tea that the Russians would have drunk before tea or from India and China was actually imported into Russia. And you basically strip the leaves off the stem and you roll the leaves. And do it around the time it's flowering, that's the best time to do it. And collect flowers at the same time, but roll the leaves and put them in a glass jar, and having washed them, I will add, and dried them, and leave them for about a week, 3 days to a week, and they start to ferment to a quite fruity smell. You then dry them either in an oven on a low setting, overnight with the door open, or in a dehydrator if you've got one. And then if you dry the flowers separately and add them, it just gives it pretty blue, because they go blue when they're dry. And that is actually really nice, because you've then got, I'm not sure these are going to stay on, maybe not. And a really nice tea. And it is a nice tea. Now, the other thing you could actually do is if you've got a cold smoker, you could also smoke the leaves. So you end up with that kind of lapsang souchong type of flavour. So there are definitely things you can do. I tend to use a few things like mint and clover more for tea. I also use bog myrtle as a flavouring. And in fact, if anybody... Yeah, when I do bramble and stuff, I quite often put a little bit in, but only a very small quantity, because if you had a lot of bog myrtle, it's an abortificant, which means it would cause someone to lose a child if they had a lot of it, and that is one of the old remedies they used. But it's also used... Yeah, so you have to think, you know, sometimes there are things you have to worry about with these species. You can't just go and use it. You need to know about it. There's a little beastie flying around, go away. The actual plants that, you know, people might need to consider worrying about might be the hogweeds and things if they're allergic to celery.
Right.
So
Okay.
that's something else to consider as well. Sorry, any other questions?
Any other questions? Yeah. No more? Yes.
Right, so basically I did use my dehydrator. So
Right,
I had
okay.
left them out for quite, you know, straining after I'd washed them. So when I actually then dried them, there wasn't so much liquid left in them, because otherwise they can just go to a kind of mush. But I find that it's best to do it on a little, I've got some of the silicone layer that I use in the dehydrator so that it's not just liquid dripping through, which it would be otherwise. So, yeah, that's the best way to do it. Yeah? Anyone else?
Any more? Yes.
What's your favourite thing to forage?
Tough question.
Now, that is such a seasonal thing, because, you know, if I'm in spring, I'm like, yeah, great, there's all these new greens. I'm absolutely loving it. You know, I can pick this and pick that. And when you start actually looking at the greens, I mean, I think this spring I was doing a foraging course, and we were doing a trip with Foraging from Oban, and I don't know, I had about 30 odd different plants by the time I'd gone out foraging over a couple of days. And I was thinking, there's a lot, you know. You don't realise how much there is out there till you just, and that's in spring and April. So I always get excited about greens. Summer, I'm not so excited by. That sounds terrible. The flowers are lovely, but actually a lot of floral things often mean sweeter drinks and syrups and so on, harder to use in the savoury sense. But I do a lot of vinegars ready to use for pickling, and that's when this is in flowering currant vinegar, for example. So that's when I might be thinking, okay, what can I do with the flowers that's not sweet? I don't have a sweet tooth, actually, really. I like savoury food. So, yeah, I'm kind of like, yeah, autumn, fungi.
Yeah.
Nuts, berries. Because hawthorn berries you can use to make like tomato ketchup, hawthorn ketchup. And they're really good for your heart and circulation, really high in vitamin C. Same with your rose hips. Rowan, you have to be a little bit more cautious with. You have to cook them. Hawthorn, you could eat raw. Rowan, you must cook, or rowan, I should say here. My dog, sorry, was called Rowan because he was a Yorkshire dog. So, so there are considerations with some plants. And actually, rowan and whitebeam, the flower buds in spring, taste like almonds, but they taste like almonds for a reason. Does anybody know what tastes like almonds that's poisonous? So cyanide basically, yeah, so basically it's a tiny bit of cyanide. So if you make a lovely syrup with them, absolutely fine, but just make sure you don't have too much, because it has got a little bit of cyanide in it. It's the same like the bitter pip of an almond, you know, plums and things. So you just think these are all plants that have a little bit of cyanide. So, yeah, do be careful on quantities. But then it's like bracken. We don't eat bracken, but in Japan and Korea they do. But they do have to cook it and treat it quite well first, because it's actually our most carcinogenic plant in the UK. So it has to be treated with caution if it's going to be eaten. And the little shoots that come up are actually the most carcinogenic, which is when they are most tender and at the best eating. So They'll boil it, throw away the water, boil it, throw away the water, pickle it, curry it. The problem with that is then you don't know if there's much nutrition left in it. So, you know, some of these things have to be treated a lot, but they fill people up. And it's like we used to use acorns. We would use them, take the tannins out by putting them in water for days till all the tannin is removed, dry them, make them into flour, and use that for bread. Problem is you haven't got the gluten there, but you get a flatbread, or you could use them in biscuits. And it was considered poor man's bread.
Yeah.
But during war years and things, wow, you know, great food source, actually, for protein. We used to eat tulip bulbs as well, incidentally, which are disgusting, apparently. But the yellow bit in the middle of a tulip bulb is poisonous. So you had to take that out. So there are lots of things we have used in the past that are a bit of a fiddle, and we probably wouldn't bother with now. But actually, in times of famine, you have to think out the box, and so there's a lot there. So we're going to take these out eventually to the stand, because it's the easiest way of, and I could try and put out, I could probably get a few more out, actually. Got 3 minutes.
3 minutes.
Ooh, can I? We'll get a few more out. So it means that if you come to the stand afterwards, I'll try and get some more of these out, and then you can actually have a taste.
Any final questions? Oh, yes.
Now.
Excellent question.
Very good question.
There you are.
Now then.
Thank you.
It's believed there may be up to 10 million fungi, okay? Up to 10 million. There's probably around 3 million, 3.5 million known about. And in this country, we have quite a few. If you look at one of the more common books, like Collins' fungi book, there's about 2,500. So trying to learn which ones you can eat and which ones you can't can be quite tricky. But you'll have certain genuses and families within those kingdoms that you just can't eat any of. So there might be a kingdom called Cortinarius, or I should say family called Cortinarius. You can't eat any of those. So that's quite useful to know if you found one and you knew what it was. But there are some good ones you could recognise. So field mushrooms, chanterelle, hedgehog fungus. Hedgehog fungus have little white teeth underneath, and they're sort of whitey colour. And because they've got the little teeth, it's a good giveaway that you found a hedgehog fungus. There are others with teeth underneath, but none of them in this country are poisonous. Chanterelle, there's only one other lookalike in this country, and that's the false chanterelle, and it's not deadly or anything. Some people it disagrees with, so we don't recommend it. But chanterelle have stringy stems. False chanterelle snap. So if you come to the stand afterwards, I can show you what happens with a chanterelle. The stem will be stringy like string cheese. So puffballs, big white things, you know, you can get big ones, giant ones. You're not going to mistake those for anything else. But you might get little ones in the wood that look like puffballs, but there might be earth balls, which means they're going to be black inside and inedible.
Okay.
So that's a good question, because there's some out there that we do eat that we wouldn't recommend other people eat, because you really need to know your amanitas in particular, which include the death cap.
Right. There's so much to learn. There's so much to learn. That was really really great. Your knowledge is just astounding. I hope everyone's enjoyed that and feel a bit inspired to think differently.
And we'll be handing these out.
Yeah.
So, yes.
Do more with nettles. That's a big takeaway for me, yeah.
And I'll say something else as well, which is that, you know, if you're coming on the foraging courses, I mean, what we do is we spend 4 hours really looking in the morning at different species and plants. We try to get into what we have in a certain area. So it might be coastal with seaweeds and plants on the shore. It could be a woodland situation, or it might be in meadows. Occasionally we get a mixture of a bit of both. And it does mean we can pick out some of the more common species that are easily identifiable. I think that's important for people to get going, because I don't want to be saying, oh, some really complicated fungi that you are never going to remember on a first sort of foraging trip. If people then wanted to book me bespoke, then we can get into slightly more nitty-gritty detail. So thank you.
Thank you so much. That's the alarm.